We got up on the Sunday morning. It was glorious sunshine. And Philip and I always used to have a cigarette in the garage and a cup of tea. But we went and sat in the garden. And I said to him, "What do you want to do today?" And he said, "Oh, we'll go for a run out to the coast if you like." Pet Lamb, which was his pet name for me. One of them anyway. And I said, "Oh, well, I need to get to Darlington because my daughter's best friend was getting married and she wanted to buy a little dress for my granddaughter." So I said, "I'll go to Darlington. Why don't you just go out for an hour on your bike?" I don't know whether you're aware, he bought the bike the day before. He'd only had it a day and he hadn't actually ridden it. And he simply said, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea." So we had our breakfast, did the usual things. He took me to Darlington, dropped me off in Darlington around about 11:30 on the morning. I did a little bit of shopping. I rang him around about 11:45 and got no reply. Then he must have tried to ring me back around about 12:30, and I did have a message on my phone, but unfortunately I deleted it by mistake because I've listened to it that many times, trying to make sense of all of it and what time scale. He rang me at 19 minutes past 12, said he was having a bite to eat and then he was going to go out on the bike. So the weather was absolutely beautiful. It wasn't like it was wet conditions or anything like that. Philip had then, I believe, from what I've pieced together, he'd gone out around 1 o'clock. I'd got a bus back from Darlington about 8 minutes past 1 and got off at the big club, and because the bus route wasn't coming this way, and thought, "Oh, I'll just nip to see Tony." So I went to see Tony and he was busy pottering around the house and making a Sunday lunch. So I asked him if there was room for a little one and he said no problem. So we had our lunch, washed the dishes, I went outside for a cigarette and just happened to go on Facebook. And I had a private message from Jane Ackley. A good friend of Philip's was Paul Ackley, Jane's husband. And the private message simply said, "Phone Paul, it's important." I'd asked Philip to ring Paul that morning regarding a kitchen, because that's what he does, he's a kitchen fitter. And I thought it's strange that she put important, because I thought if it's about the kitchen, it's not really important. But anyway, I'm a bit of a novice where it comes to mobile phones. I couldn't figure out how to get Paul's number from my private message onto my phone, so Tony said, "I'll ring the number." Tony rang Paul, obviously passed the phone to me, it rang, I answered the phone and said, "Hi Paul, it's Lydia. I don't think I said, "Is everything okay?" I just said "It's Lydia," and he just simply said, "Has anybody been in touch with you?" And I said no. Thought it was a bit of a strange thing to say, but then started to feel in my stomach something's wrong. Paul then asked where I was, because I think he was afraid that I was on my own, and I said I was at Tony's. He said, "Can you put Tony on the phone?" So he put Tony on the phone. I put Tony on the phone, and the next thing I know, I was sat in Tony's living room with my head down looking at my feet, and I see Tony's feet appear, and he just lifted my face up and said, "I think Phil's dead." And I just went hysterical, and I was like screaming and crying and saying, "What you mean? You're all lying to me. What do you mean he's dead?" And it comes out after this that Philip had taken his bike out. He'd seen something on the dashboard that he wasn't quite sure about, and Paul's a biker, so he'd phoned Paul and said, "Oh, there's something on the dashboard, mate, I'm not quite sure about." So Paul had simply said, "Well, get your crash helmet on, get your gear back on, go around the roundabout, go back home and read the manual a bit more." And he said, "Yeah, that's what I'm going to do." And unfortunately, around about probably less than 5 minutes later, Philip was killed. From the reports from the police, Philip was overtaking a car. He was doing around 55 miles an hour. He certainly wasn't speeding, the police have told me that. They don't know what happened then. It happened so quickly. But the guy in the car, Martin, got to Philip straight away, phoned the last number in his phone, who was Paul Ackley. Paul answered the phone and sort of said, "What do you want now, Phil?" So the guy on the phone said, "It's not Phil. Who am I talking to?" And he said, "Paul Ackley." He said, "I'm sorry, mate, there's been an accident." So Paul had said, "Well, how bad is it?" He said, "Well, as bad as it gets." So obviously this young man knew Philip was dead. And Paul had said he could hear the air ambulance in the distance. And they do apparently have to try for 20 minutes to save that person, which they did. I believe they cut. I do have his jacket back, where they cut the sleeves to try and get a line in. And when I went to identify him, they did still have the stickers on him. You know, like when they try and bring somebody back to life. The police turned up around about an hour and a half later at Tony's. Tony left the house and phoned the police and said, "We believe there's been a road traffic accident near Woodham Golf Club. Have reason to believe my brother-in-law's involved and my sister's here. Can anybody give us any information?" They simply said, "We'll ring you back." I don't think they rang back. It's all a bit of a blur to be honest. But they then turned up at Tony's house. By that time, the house was full. I had my daughter there, my granddaughter. They took me to a quiet room and just said that, asked me if I could describe Philip's clothes because he didn't have any ID with him. And I'd said he had a Triumph jacket on, it was brand new, the make of his boots, his colour of his crash helmet and such like. And they just said, "I'm really sorry, Mrs. Joss, Philip was announced dead at the scene." And then another police officer came, which was a family liaison police officer, and just said that there'd be an investigation, and that they would be back in touch that day because obviously they had to formally identify him, and that would be my job or maybe one of Philip's brothers, because he has two brothers on the town, Graham and Kevin. But obviously I wanted to do that, and it was around about 7 o'clock. I was taken to Darlington Memorial Hospital, to the mortuary, and just saw him there. He wasn't pretty. I was lucky enough that Philip had no facial injuries. He simply had a scratch on his nose where his glasses had obviously embedded into his nose, and he did have a head injury, but they'd dressed that, so I didn't see that. And the police said he wouldn't have known anything about it. It was so quick. And as far as I'm aware, there's still an investigation going on. All I've had is a coroner's report to say he's deceased. I don't have a death certificate as yet because they've done toxology testing, which can take up to 3 months to come back, just to make sure Philip wasn't over the limit. I've since spoken to people who he was out with on the Saturday night, because he was at the Rafa Club all night, and they said he was very quiet compared to what he normally was, that he hadn't had a great deal to drink, maybe 4 pints, which will have been way out of his system by 1 o'clock the next day. So he wasn't over the limit, because he knew he was going to take his bike out for the first time. That's basically what happened that day.